Good afternoon. Welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed your day and the unbelievable panel discussions that have taken place throughout this convention so far. I am LaShawn Warren, the Director of Programs here at ACS. And tonight we have an exciting program for you. And to kick it off is one of ACS's favorite member of Congress, Representative Donna Edwards from the 4th District of Maryland. Representative Edwards was elected in 2008 as the first African-American woman to represent Maryland. She is a member of the House Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, Science and Technology, as well as the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. She is a powerful voice speaking for equality and against injustice. And she has long been engaged with and a supporter of a variety of ACS activities. She is a progressive champion, and we are so happy to have her here. So please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Donna Edwards.
Good evening, or is it still afternoon? Well, for those of you who are not from Washington, welcome to Washington. It's great to have you here. I have both the luxury and privilege of representing a congressional district that's right outside of Washington, D.C., and Prince George's in Montgomery County, Maryland, and have lived in and worked around this city for a really long time, mostly in the nonprofit sector. And there's so many of you. I was looking through the program today, and if you're out there and you're a friend and I haven't been in touch with you, hey, how you doing? Congress kind of takes up a little bit of time, but I've had the privilege of working in and around this city on public policy issues for probably about 25 years, and I think there's not a single issue on which I've worked over the course of that time in the nonprofit sector that hasn't in some ways touched upon the Constitution. And I want to thank you all for both being here and also for the work that you do, whether it's in the civil justice system or the criminal justice system, or it's a public sector, nonprofit sector, or it's in private practice, representing the interest of ordinary people across this country who may not think about the Constitution every single day, but for whom that document, though it may be remote and a little bit old, is still very timely. I know that you had a chance to hear from the Attorney General, and I will just share with you, I'm sure he wouldn't have shared it with you, but I like to say that Eric Holder and I came on to the D.C. Superior Court at the same time. I was a law clerk, he was a judge. But in that time that I clerked at the D.C. Superior Court, one of the things that I really learned, and it's always stuck with me, is the importance of access to the justice system for real people. And I think as a young lawyer, and now as a not so practicing lawyer, but member of Congress, somebody who makes public policy, it is that framework that really sticks with me, and I know that it sticks with you. And we are in a really interesting time when things as near and dear to each of us in our lives as health care are going to find their way, those issues find their way into our judicial system, where we're in the midst of now yet another election cycle in which the impact of the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United just a year and a half ago have a really tremendous impact on the way that we conduct our public policy, the way that we conduct our elections, and the way that corporations and individuals participate in the political process. And those are all things for those of us who are lawyers who care about the Constitution, who care about freedom, who care about justice, care about the way that these decisions impact us. We also are in a circumstance where in the United States Congress, and particularly over there in that other body, we have seen, and I will say the word because I can, because I don't represent anyone in the United States Senate, but I will say where nominations for all of our federal courts at every level have languished, and that is having a really tremendous impact on the ability of ordinary people to seek and achieve justice in our system. This is really unacceptable, and I don't know what he said last night, but I'll bet you the Attorney General has a few things to think about that, because it impacts the work that he does, but more importantly, it impacts the work of just people who need to be able to get to a beginning and an end in a court process. And when the United States Senate, because it is jammed and deadlocked and filibustered, is not able to move appointments through the process in the traditional role of advise and consent, that is a problem for all of us as Americans. When I look at our system today, and I look at our public policy, and I think that, you know, something that as a young woman growing up and being a, you know, sort of the byproduct and having the advantages and benefits of a robust civil rights movement, had the ability to go to school under the tenets of affirmative action, had the ability to get something as simple as a Pell Grant and a student loan and a scholarship in that time, and to grow and to develop on the shoulders of past generations, that I wonder whether it is that our future generations will have that same access because of the closure that we see on basic civil rights in this country. When I look here and around the world and I think about the human rights dilemmas that we face, that those things are not just exclusive to the developing world and the emerging world, that those challenges for human rights are present in this country as well. When we still have state after state that has on its books and sometimes actually engages in the practice of execution in this country as a means of punishment, I think that that is a problem. I think that I don't think that we can separate our system and practice of capital punishment from the injustices of human rights in other parts of the world. That as difficult as those concerns are in places as, you know, far afield as Libya and Syria and Tunisia and Egypt, that they are difficulties that we face here, perhaps on a different level, perhaps on a different scale, perhaps in a different environment, but the human rights and justice is the same. And the impact for those of us who care about the way that we develop our communities, the way that we grow our young people, the way that we engage in our system, we have an obligation, I think, as lawyers to rethink this system. And so I applaud you, for so many of you, for the work that you do in that arena. I want to talk a little bit about judicial independence. And part of the reason is because before I was, you know, long before I was in the United States Congress, I spent a little bit of time at the ARCA Foundation, a small family foundation here in the District of Columbia. And we had the privilege of being able to fund public policy work around this country that was focused on judicial independence. It's something that I actually believe in really strongly. And the reason is because if the judiciary can't be independent, there's no other place for people to get justice. And we have seen in this country increasingly that whether it's at the local and state level or whether it's at the federal level, that our judiciary is being infringed upon by our politics. And I think that those of us who really care about the law, and, you know, some of us are older and younger than others, but I think all of us went to law school for a reason. You know, we went to law school because we actually believe in those documents. It's not Pollyanna. It's real. It's believable. And even, you know, I remember having a conversation with my grandmother. She's long since died, but many years ago. And even though she came out of a generation where she didn't enjoy the full value of her civil rights because of a system that we had in place, she actually believed in the document. She believed in constitutional values and principles. She knew that she didn't have them. She knew that her and her generation and my parents' generation had to fight for those rights, but they believed in them. And that's the same way that we do too. And the last arbiter of those rights is our judiciary. And so it's so important, more than any other place in our government, it's actually so important that there be independence from all of the political dynamics and for the, the whirlwinds of the headlines and the cable news and, tweet and Twitter and all of that stuff. It's really important for us to preserve and protect our judiciary. And I think that more than so many other people, all of you here in this room understand and appreciate that. And so we have a lot of work to do. I was recently with a couple of judges who are the judges on Supreme Courts, justices on Supreme Courts in a couple of different states. And they are also in state systems where judges are elected. And I think that we have some real questions about whether that makes sense for us, whether that is at the local level or it's at the at a higher level or at the state level, whether the election of judges makes sense, whether it makes sense in a given locale for the very people who are practicing before that bar to be able to make a contribution when decisions are coming before that bar. That raises questions both for our profession and it raises questions for our judiciary, and it goes at the question of whether we have the kind of independence that we need to enjoy. As a woman who's not so young anymore, I was with a group of young women this morning who are active in politics, a group of women college Democrats, and they're concerned about our elections, but they're also concerned about their privacy rights. They're concerned. They want to know whether it's, and they ask questions about whether it's right for the government to get a list of books that they're buying or checking out in a library. They ask questions about whether it's okay for the government to have anything to do with the decisions that they make between themselves and their doctors. These young women were asking questions about whether it makes sense to have government intruding in ways that impact their own privacy. And they're just beginning to ask these questions. And I think it's up to those of us who are in this room to begin to construct some answers for them and to begin to respond in a way that says, I believe in things like our national security and protecting our national security, but I think that there has to be a balance that's struck in a free society. To say to them, I believe that the government has a role in setting rules and regulations and practice that govern how a medical facility can operate or not in a state or in a local community. But I don't think it's right for us to intrude upon the decisions and the communications that take place between a woman and her doctor with regard to her reproductive health care or any other kind of health care. These are the questions that young people are asking us, and we have the challenge of responding to those questions today. And so I want to close by just sharing with you that actually I have somebody else's speech here today, so I'm not going to read that. But I just want to close by sharing with you today that I think that the importance that you all play in the decisions that we make in the United States Congress are really critical. I think that hearing from you about what makes sense in terms of the way that we think about our founding documents and the way that we think about our law and policy is really important. I think that unless we hear from you, that we run the risk of making some decisions that will last us a lifetime and that will be, in fact, very dangerous to us. And the things that we give up today because we're afraid, or the things that we give up today because we don't know what tomorrow will bring, that tomorrow when we wake up, that young generation that I just talked about, the students from the College of Law in Idaho, is that right? Where are you? There you are. That what will happen if we make decisions today that are actually not thoughtful, or actually are not looking ahead, that we run the risk of devaluing the very document that all of us really care about. And it's those of us in this room and more of us having that conversation around this country that will make that difference. And so I don't want to, as a policymaker, I don't want to operate out of fear. I don't want to operate out of ignorance. And I don't want to operate in an environment in which things are at such a decibel level that, that we forget both where we've come from and we have no perspective in terms of where we want to go. And that, after all, is what that Constitution gives to us. Now, I'm also one of those who, I'm a little bit of a geek. I have a little red Constitution. It's great because it's handbag size. And every once in a while, you know, in these political debates, you'll have somebody who just comes out like citing something that they think is in the Constitution. It turns out it's really not. It's just something they heard or they read on the internet or, you know, wherever it is that they found it. And I think one of the reasons that I have that is because at its core, it means something to us. It's a kind of thing that actually unites us. It's a document that actually that pulls together our shared values, our commonality, and our common experience. And I've heard it said that while it's true that you know, those folks that wrote that thing weren't really thinking about my grandparents and my great-grandparents, we've actually made them think about my grandparents and my great-grandparents. That's the beauty of who we are. It's the beauty of the work that we've done. And in that same way, it's the document that we're going to use to help us think about about people who want to immigrate to this great country and share in its prosperity and its growth and its development in the way that many other generations shared in. It's the document that says to us as women that eventually one of these old days we're going to be paid at the same value as men who do the same work. It's the document that says to us that no matter how scared we get, we're still not willing to give up on things as fundamental as our privacy. On things as fundamental as our ability to speak and to say the things that we want without fear of being handcuffed and arrested and tortured. It's the document that says to the rest of the world who we are. And so I just want to urge us all to continue our work. I want to urge us to press forward, press the United States Senate to get on with its job so that we can both ensure independence but also make sure that people have the access to justice that they need. I want you to press forward with your work to make sure that the big banks aren't saying to the little people who might be in danger of losing your homes, we can just rubber stamp documents and send them through because people won't have access to a lawyer and a judge that will say, well, wait a second here, you just didn't do the right thing and you didn't follow through on the process that you described. It's the work that you do to make sure that that our collective rights are actually understood in a way that gives us value. We have a lot of work to do. We need serious people to do that work, and we need you in the room to make sure that those of us who are policymakers don't forget the communities from which we come. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I wish you, a good finish to your conference. You've already had such a wonderful beginning. And when I'm out in some state or other, because I have to do that other political stuff, and you're in the room, just give me a shout out and say, hey, I was at the ACS conference. Thank you very much.